I'm going to get them a golf ball, I'm going to send it to them. That will blow your donor away. They're going to say, now that's remarkable. That is so unique. I didn't remember telling you I like to golf. Well, I did remember, and then you've got them. It's things, both why they give your ministry as well as their personal things. Get to know your donors is the key there. Most people don't. They just decide to go after the money. They decide to go after what it is we want to put onto them, etc. Did you have a question?
No, just kind of when you're going after donors kind of thing. If I meet in their office, I scan their office.
Yeah.
I'm always going to take notes afterwards, but I'm always scanning their office.
Smart.
Family values. They got a cell phone. This is the school they went to. This is the degrees they have. You know, the things that they're proud of.
Yeah.
Their trophies, right?
Absolutely.
And so I always look for their trophies, and then I attach trophies to them.
Yeah.
You know, because that's what they're interested in. That's what they value. Because whatever they're hanging on their walls is what they value.
Yeah.
Interesting.
A great example. Hopefully everybody could hear that example. So one of the things you might do, and you may do, is think about how do I recognize this donor in a really special way that they're going to be proud enough to hang it on their wall. So Orange County Rescue Mission, again, I mentioned that I work with them. One of the things they did for their major donors to be remarkable is they'd hit these milestones and they'd have this gigantic poster, and it was I can't do it justice, but it's very well designed. It's very, you know, it has Bible verses, it has photos, it has live change, and it calls out attention to that donor about the fact that they give is because you make all these stories possible. They proudly displayed that. The reps would go into these homes and there would be the poster, that type of thing. That's what I'm talking about, you know, and making sure that you're providing something to them. What can I do for them? Because I noticed all these things.
And it doesn't have to be major. It's the $2 gift that makes the difference in their lives, right? Because they can afford, especially our major donors, they can buy whatever they want.
Yeah, absolutely.
They can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
It's when you pique their interest in what their interest is.
You got it.
Yeah.
So really important to make sure we're digging and understanding interests and passions and desires for what they want to do to help change the world. And that's that point. The other key point is determine what their communication preferences should be. Believe it or not every donor wants to see you in their living room. These days, with technology where it is, we have to honor what the donor wants. And I had one organization I was consulting with who this donor was always overseas traveling, and what their preference was instant messaging. So the guy that I worked with, who was the chief development officer, had a caseload. This donor was on it, and we strategized ideas and approaches. He was literally instant messaging this donor at midnight Portland time. It's a ministry in Portland. The donor gave $200,000 over instant messaging and fulfilled. Why? Because that was their communication preference. They're really busy. For whatever reason, sometimes we choose to ignore that. And leadership at the ministry will say, Carter, the way I hold my team accountable, it's all based on face-to-face. If you're not doing 35 face-to-face a month, you're failing. And I say, no, that's not failing, because do you know that the donors actually want to meet face-to-face? Do you really think 35 of them do? And they're like, I hadn't really thought about that. Because some donors appreciate, yes, face-to-face in some cases, but some just say, keep mailing me your newsletter. I would love to hear, but I don't need you to come see me. I'm busy, you know. Do they like the phone? Do they want to text? Is there another way they prefer? Let's ask our donors, how is the best way that you would prefer that I stay in touch? Is it okay if I send you our newsletter? And, you know, we have our regular mailings that we send out. You don't call them appeals. We send mailings. And most donors are going to love to be asked this question, because most organizations, again, do not ask. They just decide, I'm going to force my way into the living room because management told me that I have to have face-to-face. You wouldn't believe how many organizations do this. I kid you not. So that's really important, is determine their preferences. Then we need to base our plan. What are our touch points and things like that are going to be in the communication channel that they actually want to be related to. That's really important. When we honor that, we're being remarkable to them. The other thing we do is, once you have 150 donors, let's say in the ideal world of your case, so I have now I have 150 donors that are, number one, they do want to relate to me. I've proven they want a two-way relationship. And I didn't spend a lot of time on how to do that, but I can touch on that as well. But So I have 150 donors, so I have the right size caseload. Now, I understand that how their communication preferences are. I understand how they prefer to be related to stay in touch, etc. Now what I need to do is I need to help prioritize my 150 donors into tiers. So tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, this is pretty typical. Our tier 1 are going to be donors who have they're based on the highest value. That's our first ranking. There may be reasons why you love to meet with a donor who only gives $1,000 a year, and you're ignoring the donor who gives $10,000 a year and not spending as much time. You actually need to change that paradigm so you're focused on the top donors based on how much they give. Because what we have found, in this case, on average 20 to 25 donors for your 150 should be tier A. Typically tier 1 or tier A should be at least half of the value of the caseload. So if you have $1 million caseload, let's say, tier 1, these 20 to 25 donors are most likely giving 500,000 of that million. We're going to spend a disproportionate amount of time here as we are in the other tiers. So this is a very much, tier 1 is one-to-one, very, very, very personal. Tier 2, think more of a one-to-some approach. So, well, let me go down to tier 3. One-to-some, and then tier 3 is more of a one-to-many. Here's what I mean by that. So one-to-one, let's just say your touch point is going to be a note card to thank them for a recent gift or to tell them something in writing. So you probably hand write the whole card to tier A, tier 1, write my card, hand sign it, hand address it, and I send that out to my 20 to 25. Maybe with tier 2, I only write one sentence and then sign my name. And then tier 3, maybe I just sign my name on the card. You get the idea that you spend a lot more time developing the one-to-one with this group as opposed to down here. I had one of the clients I worked with, this woman who was the major gift officer kept playing with the donor and meeting every week would have crepes with this donor, crepes, because she was being discipled by this donor. She's like, I get as much out of meeting with this donor as she gets meeting with me. We became friends and all that. And what I had to do, I had to say, you need to raise your sights. It's lovely that you want to go have crepes with this person, but what are you doing to tier 1 up here? How are you spending time with those donors? People get naturally distracted. I know it's hard to believe, but they do. They wander all over the place, and you find them down here, and you have to lift their sights up as we meet together and say, well, that's great, but what are you doing up in the higher level? So that's the tiering of the caseload. It's really important.
Yes.
Yeah,
on that, I heard another gentleman that has worked a lot in this area. Tier 1 is like your family. You want to spend more time with your family.
Sure.
Tier 2 is friends. They're friends. You still want to spend time with them, but not like your family. And 3 is just acquaintances.
Yeah, great way to think about it.
Different terminology for the same concept.
Same exact idea. You got it. And it's not rocket science, right? It's so obvious, but you lose sight of doing these things. And that's really important. The seventh step, or the next step, is to determine a revenue goal for every donor on your caseload. I sometimes work with organizations where I come in and I say, well, tell me about how you guys figure out how much you should grow your major gift program. And they said, well, typically it's handed down by management. In fact, Carter, there was a board retreat this last weekend, and they came back and said they would really be proud that if we could grow it by 17% next year. And I said, now, how did they figure that out? I don't actually know, but that's what we got to go with. And right, this is not an uncommon story. And you're like, how did you come up with that? Well, what we want to do is we want to go for every single donor on a caseload and look at the history of their giving and figure out what's the goal for that donor. Not as a combined caseload, but literally individuals. You'll have some donors that you have no problem thinking you can double their gift because they gave 10,000. You know you can get 20. So in that case, you're going to set a goal of 20. 100% increase. Another donor who typically gives $1 million and they can give 1.3, the percentage of growth is smaller, but it's still, you can set a goal. And then at the end of doing all that, we're going to see what the growth is for that one and then compare it to the 16 or 17% that was told that we needed to grow by. And then we're going to try to reconcile those two things. Because we might say back, hey, it's great you set a goal of 17% growth, but we can actually hit 24%. Let's not announce that right now, but we think we can do that as a team. They're like, this is great, but you got to do it. You got to do it for every donor, and you need to cash flow their goals. So if you know that a donor typically always gives at Easter in March, and they give it Thanksgiving, let's just say those are their two times. I need to make sure that I budget essentially that I'm gonna get part of their gift in March, and I'm gonna get part of their gift in October. And I'm gonna actually plan that out and cash flow it for every single donor so that every month I will know how I'm doing versus my goal. I don't wanna wait till 10 months into the fiscal year to realize I'm only half the way there, I'm in deep trouble. Well, if you've been setting a goal and actually cash flowing it, you won't run into that problem nearly as much. And it's another thing. The other thing I'll say is on capacity or wealth ratings. You know, that's always the magic bullet you hear about. Well, we're going to do a wealth overlay, and then we're going to rank our portfolio based on that. I'm telling you, these are about 50% reliable at best. Don't put a lot of faith. Use it as another data point if you want to do an overlay. Don't make that your end-all be-all because you're going to be disappointed if you do that. So that's really, really important. And then I already mentioned projecting the 12-month revenue goal overall. Step 8, and by the way, there's only 32 steps, so just stay with me. I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that to you. There's only like 10. So step 8 is we want to develop a strategic plan for every donor. Now that sounds so fancy, like how could you, Carter, possibly have a strategic plan? Well, what I'm talking about as strategic plan is one touch point per month per donor that's on your caseload, okay? And that touch point is in addition to what they're already getting. Now, oftentimes they're saying, so what you're telling me, Carter, is we ought to leave them in the appeal stream, we ought to leave them getting our newsletters, and you want to send them some sort of touch point or do a touch every month? The answer is yes. Because you may think that sounds like a lot, but if you're relevant to your donor and they value you as a ministry, they are not going to be offended by getting a touch point. As long as it's based on their passions, their interests and desires, as long as it's in their communication preference, you guys get the idea. You got to have a plan to make sure you're staying in touch with the donor. It doesn't mean you're going to mail them something every time. It might be a phone call, or it might be, hey, I was at Pebble Beach, and I said, you know, you send a little note, or you send a birthday card, or an anniversary card, or a milestone email to say you've just reached 50, you know, your $50,000 gift and that sort of thing. We want to have a plan for every one of those 150 donors. And it sounds overwhelming, but once you get a plan in place, you start working that plan every day, the major gift officers come in, they know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. When they do that and they follow the plan, it's going to work really well. I promise you. Do you have a question?
Yeah, have you ever, what we do in our mission is I turn it back on our donors. So I ask them to touch point with me and come for a tour on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Okay.
And our time is available for you to come down and see us.
Yes.
So I flip it. I don't determine their time, they determine their time.
Yeah.
That gets more people in our door, and so when they're in our door, they're in the ether, they get to see what we're doing.
Absolutely.
We get to smell, touch, feel, we get to tell them the 20-minute tour, and they're out the door.
Exactly.
Right? So
And that's a beautiful touch point right there.
I flip it, so.
Yeah, and but that is a touch point. It's not about mailing something. It could be inviting them for a tour. You guys all know you have a huge advantage being a local ministry in your marketplace because every time a donor, this is not unusual, comes in and you take them on a tour, what's the first thing they say? I never knew you did all this. Every time. I had no idea. And then they walk out all fired up, and guess what? They're going to give you a big gift because they saw it, they smelled it, they felt it, they talked to people, and they're like, you know what? I was always scared of homeless people. This guy I talked to, he was a college graduate. He got into drugs. He hit hard times, and through no fault, I mean, it was his fault, his own, but you know what? There were circumstances that led him to be homeless. This is an intelligent gentleman here. This is not somebody that's uncommon to who, you know, my friends are. How did he get here? And then they realized homeless people aren't just bad people that they thought they were scared of. I never knew you did that. I never knew these were great people. And then they all of a sudden get bought in even further to your cause, and they're like, you know what? I'm going to talk to my husband. We're going to commit to that $100,000. You told me about the Women and Children's Program, and you're telling me that you may have to cut part of your services. Don't do that. I'm going to talk to my husband, and guess what? $100,000 gift comes in a few days later. Get them on site because you have them at hello. Once you do, they'll be bonded for
I did
a
that
long
to a
time.
guy, and he brought a team in for Sunday night and Monday. They cooked dinner for everybody.
Beautiful.
So I don't have to pay staff. They do it.
There you go. And they love it.
They bought in.
They love it. Absolutely
I
right.
have a quick question though. If the donor
Yeah.
says, hey, I've got 4 other ministries I support, you call me twice a year, you're gonna make a note in your database for that person to say twice a year, right?
That's it. Yep. Honor the donor. When our donors tell us something, we need to actually follow up. Put yourself in their shoes. Nothing worse than if you ask somebody to do something and you're a buyer of a product and you return it and they say, we're gonna give you a full refund, but you never hear anything and you're wondering when the refund's coming and you keep checking your statements and you call them back and they're like, oh, we lost that. Tell me again. And you're like, you're killing me. We have to take care of our donors in those ways that we're making notes and keeping track of everything. So that's a strategic plan for every donor. Now, hard to see, I realize, but this drives home the point of the plan for every donor. So these are just fictitious ideas here. So we have John Baker, let's say he's on our caseload. John, we've set a goal of 5,000 donors. We know his history is 1,500, 2,500, and we've decided, I think John can give 5,000. I mean, we know this about him. I've been in his office. I mean, I've seen what he drives and all those things. And you're like, I think we can. So you set a goal. We understand what his passions and his interests are is disaster services. And his communication preference is email, okay? So with John, we know all these things about him. What we'll do is we'll drive his strategic plan based on, one, we know what he typically gives. That's when we're gonna ask, okay? And you'll notice his strategic plan is gonna be based primarily in email. So we're gonna send him a YMAD, that's a you made a difference. That's a reporting back about the difference you made through your giving. We're going to email John an internal memo from our executive director talking about some big new initiative that's not yet known to the public. But John, I got to tell you, this is going to be amazing, and you're the first to know type thing. We invite him to a briefing. We, send the birthday card electronically, things like that. So that's John. So we're treating him as an individual donor based on all the things we know about him. Now, Cindy. We have a goal for Cindy of $25,000 because we know her history and we know what she can give. Her passion and interest is single moms, and her preference is personal visits, okay? So with Cindy, rather than the You Made a Difference touch being electronic in January for John, we're actually going to talk to Cindy. We're taking her to Applebee's to have lunch and then tell her how she made a difference. She's a tier 1. We know what she gives. We're going to spend a lot of one-on-one time, and that's face-to-face. We're going to tour. We're going to give her a tour, like House of Hope. This is Orange County. We're going to make sure she meets Sally and her child because there's a great story there. In other words, you develop a plan, and notice her asks are in different months because we know that about her, and we develop her plan based on all these factors that I already mentioned. That's what I'm talking about for each caseload donor. And it sounds overwhelming, but if you do this right, you take the time to do it right, you are going to be amazed at how well it will go. I promise you. Not only with your existing major gift officers that you have in place, but it's going to actually drive additional hires to help take care of more and more donors like this as they continue to migrate up. And your mid-level program feeds this group. Step 9 is developing offers. A lot of times what happens with major gift officers and mid-level officers is they don't have offers to present to their donors. So it's the whole thing where management has told the major gift officer, the only thing you can do is raise unrestricted money because that's what we need. Don't give the donor any opportunity to give a designated gift because we can't deal with that, okay? Well, there are ways around that. We can still talk to donors about their passion and interest and all those good things together. We can talk about what our offers are to help this and help that person and help this group and help this program, et cetera. Most donors, when you say, you know what, we've actually funded that whole program, would you be willing to let me use your gift to do these things? Because I want to tell you about those. And then, so you kind of migrate them off of their core passion and interest to ask about other areas. 99% of the time, they're most likely to say, I trust you, John. Use my gift where you guys need it most. That's not uncommon. So don't be afraid to provide offers to your major gift officers that they can show donors how they'll have a real and immediate impact on what it is you're talking with them about. A lot of organizations don't give major gift officers. Think about it in the sales world. Let's say you went to work for Apple. Let's just say you're on the sales force and they say, you know what, Joe, I need you to go to Best Buy and see if you can get a lot more of our product moving. And so Joe says, well, where's the product? Well, let me show you the warehouse. And he walks back there and there's all these empty shelves. And he's like, Now, how am I gonna try to talk to this company about getting more of our products moved if I don't even know what the products are? Now, that's a ridiculous story, but it does happen in this world where major gift officers don't have true things to go talk to donors about, and it's all unrestricted gifts. Just go tell them what a great thing we're doing. That doesn't cut it anymore. Donors, especially nowadays, demand feedback on how they're investing and how their gifts are making a difference. And so we need to make sure we're providing offers for them. We help organizations do this if they don't have it. I think this step 10 may be my last one. There may be 11 that I added, but the other thing is what we want to make sure we do. And if I could back up, 20 slides. I remember how I talked about how major gift growth comes through accountability and management. This is a critical component of making sure we're managing our major gift officers. Again, that's work that I've done and that I do. And by making sure we're managing them and holding them accountable, they actually end up doing what they say they're going to do because they have an accountability partner. So in our model, and there's models out there, there's models that are different from ours, but what we do is we schedule a one-on-one weekly meeting with every major gift officer, actually spend that time to strategize how you've been remarkable. Tell me about this donor. Look at that. Now, why did you do that? If that's their communication preference, why did you decide to do that? And it's not in a negative way, it's a true partnership way. And major gift officers love it because they finally have someone to relate to, because as I said before, most of them are just thrown to the wolves. Go raise the money. And they're like, no one's told me any direction, how many donors I should have in my case, and all those things. We help with that. So review meetings, determine what their progress is, how are they doing, and do we need to make adjustments? Maybe they're not in the right role. We help, with that. You need to be willing to say, Sally she's a sweet woman, she's awesome, but she actually doesn't ever want to ask for money. That's a blocker for her. She told me she'll never ask. Well, Sally is holding us back from making sure we unlock the grace of giving from a lot of our donors if she's never willing to ask. Because donors actually want to know what you want them to do. If you go in there and you hem and you haw and you hope that they give, donors are going to wonder, what do you want from me? In a nice way. You can't just go and have the friendship without making the ask. So we help with that as well. And then we also provide reporting updates to management. So in the case where we come in and we work with an organization, they'll have like a director of development or a chief development officer who isn't necessarily managing these people. They're letting us do that, but then we're checking on a regular basis on how is each team member doing. And it's really a win-win-win because the director of development wins because their team is doing better. The major gift and mid-level officers win because they're happier about their jobs. You're going to hold on to them for a lot longer, by the way. Average tenure right now is about 18 months for a major gift officer in any organization. They'll just fly the coop, they'll go to the next place for a little bit more money, and it happens all the time. So by taking care of our team and our donors, this all works together, and it works incredibly well. And then in terms of what the accountability looks like, we'll look at overall revenue. How's revenue to date versus last year? How are we going to course correct to get back on track? How many meaningful connections you're making? Those touch points, did they work? Let's talk and give feedback about what the responsiveness was to that donor who we sent that touch point to, or we called or whatever. And then making sure they're working their plan. We're looking at those strategic plans and we're making sure week in and week out they're following it. What always happens in my experience is the next time we meet, they're going to do 90% of the talking because they're all excited about what they did last week to be remarkable, and talk to my donors, and I understand their passion and their interest. And I met with them. They didn't want to meet face to face, but I met on Zoom and they gave me $100,000. I couldn't believe it. Well, actually do believe it because you're actually treating donors as partners, and most organizations don't do that. They just go, like I said, they go for the money. So that's what that looks like. This is just step 11. This is only if we work with organizations. We evaluate the major gift folks. I mentioned before, they may not be in the right role, or maybe they're super good at what they do, and we say, you know what? This person is so good that you ought to have them help replace me, what I was doing with the team, because I think they could actually lead this team just like I've been doing once they're up and running. And it's like we also help get folks promoted that require promoting. We talk to management, say, I don't know if you know this about, so it's this good cop, bad cop thing that works really, really well with managing some of these folks. And then just a couple of words on mid-level I want to tell you guys about. Mid-level in terms, let's remember, let's say it's $1,000 to $24.99. Let's just say an organization defines mid as that group. With mid-level donors, caseload sizes are bigger. They're 500 to 600, not 150, 500 to 600, because these folks are spending the majority of the time either emailing or calling or sending notes, but not face-to-face visits typically. There are feeders to major gifts, okay? And there's a whole science and strategy behind making sure we transition mid to major, which we won't have time to camp on right now. But in terms of their touch points, they may only get 6 to 8 touches as opposed to a monthly touch, as I mentioned before. We'll still tier those donors. There'll be bigger tiers. Tier A might be 50 donors. Tier B might be 100 donors, and then all the rest maybe tier C or tier 1, 2, 3. But we'll still tier them. Same thing applies. If you have 500 or 600 donors, we need to make sure you're focused on what you should be and making sure you're prioritizing correctly. And unless we tier those, we may not be doing that. The goal of mid is to keep and lift all donors and qualify a portion of the highest ones to major gifts. Meaning, we measure success of mid as how many mid-level donors are you migrating and graduating to major. Then once they've graduated to major, we're going to make sure that we track their performance over the next 12 months and give that person who migrated them up soft credit for the work they did. Because oftentimes what happens is a mid-level donor has this great caseload that's, let's say they have $1 million caseload from their mid-level program, and Carter, every time I send one of my donors to major, I lose that revenue. Suddenly I'm off my goal. Well, the answer is at least give them a soft credit. Hey, Joe, I know you moved this donor to major, and I know they just gave $50,000. I'm giving you that credit softly as your performance, knowing you actually helped respond or get that donor to that level. In other words, take care of the mid-level folks and make sure that you recognize that they've moved donors up. And typically, you're going to want a minimum of 3.5% to 4% of a mid-level caseload moving to major. Typically 3.5%, 4%. Now, there are organizations, Orange County is another one. I like to use them because it's such a great example of what they did right. They had one person who moved 10% of their mid to major. So if you think about that, in 1 year, moving 50 to 60 donors to major, it's like that's almost a halftime major gift officer right there. And it's through being remarkable to mid-level too. But that's a little bit different. But, so summary is, what we really want to focus on, relationships, obviously, making sure you have systems and structure in place for the team. You have inspiring offers, you're focused on return on investment, and accountability and management, I would say, is half of the reason that it works. It's not about it's about all the things that I talked about earlier, passion, interest, communication, preferences, all those wonderful things. But if you're not holding them accountable to work their plan, you're losing about 50% of the effectiveness. And so if you don't have somebody who's managing it, you ought to make sure you do have somebody that's managing it and can spend the time doing that. Those are my slides. Now, I'll open it up for questions or comments and anything else you may want to know about. Is that all helpful? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I will tell you, in your church strategy, you should be doing all this same stuff, but do it for the gatekeeper at the church. So if you know there's an office manager, my wife works at our church. She is the gatekeeper of all things when organizations say, can we come in and do Compassion? We work with Compassion on Compassion Sunday. Hey, Compassion wants to come in and do a pitch in your church. Well, if Compassion did a good job as the person who's in charge of the church, and they understand my passions and my interests, that they understand how I like to be communicated with, you're being remarkable to me, you're sending me things, and suddenly, I like this person. I get bombarded with requests, but I really like this person. I'm going to let you into the church. That works. This works with churches, with organizations, even with foundations. If you find the person who is the essentially decision maker who will let you get to the true decision maker, and you have to work through them, you got to do these kind of things. Otherwise, you're just going to be more noise. So that's the way you apply it there. And anybody that has responsibility for either donors or churches, et cetera, if you follow this process, you'll definitely have more success, I promise you. And it's also going to help you focus on the right ones, right? That want to talk to you, that don't just decide, I'm not going to give anymore because this guy bombards me constantly, that kind of thing. So think about how it applies to churches as well. It really does.
Wrinkle into your, mid-major, major, who gets credit for the donor, et cetera.
Oh, yeah.
Add a plan giving person into it, and you really have to break that from the silos. Because
Yes.
The mid-major or the major introduces that donor to the plan giving person. No, I don't know if I want to do that.
Exactly.
Who's going to take credit for it?
This is the thing, organizations sometimes, for whatever reason, they get nervous about talking about things like that. So if I had a plan giving officer and a major gift officer who were reporting to me, I would say, listen, I know that Margaret here is going to talk plan giving. I know, just don't worry about it. I've got you covered. If you reassure major gift folks that the plan giving folks are going to come in and do their thing, or capital campaigns, oftentimes I've asked, well, does Masterworks come in if we're already doing a capital campaign? I say, yes, we will, because capital campaigns start with, as you know, a select few donors. Okay, we're going to make sure they're kind of peeled out, but what about all these other donors we got to take care of? Don't get paralyzed by capital campaigns, database conversions, and rebranding. Those are the three deaths of an organization because they take forever. Oh, the database will be in by March. Okay, I'm going to call you back and well, Carter, now it's next January. Happens, doesn't matter what database. I'm not ripping on, I love databases. But it happens, and branding and capital campaigns and things like that. But reassure people that when they get a donor taken from them in some way, shape, or form, you've got them covered. I'm still going to give you the soft credit. You're doing great. I'm going to make sure that everybody understands that that donor gave that planned gift of $2 million because you did a good job doing all these things with that donor to get them to the point I wanted to give the planned gift. So you're right. It happens all the time. It really does.
So what we do is our mission, we created a relay team, right?
Okay.
So it's everybody's involved. It's not just, it's the handoff of the donor. It's the person that makes the first introduction, and then it gets handed off to the next person, and the whole team's involved. So it's not just a one-on-one all the time.
How well, so who's terminally responsible for that donor? At the end of the day, let's say that donor, I'm making it up, they gave $50,000 last year. We're in month 11 of our year. They told us they were going to do something. They haven't yet. Is there somebody who loses sleep at night? That sounds dramatic. They lose sleep about the fact that they're not getting the $50,000 gift, and they say, well, that's not my responsibility, because oftentimes relays